Have you ever made a bet that changed your life forever? When Madison Sterling, a millionaire CEO, stormed into a rundown pool bar after losing the biggest deal of her career, she had no idea a reckless bet with a janitor would cost her more than a $200,000 Porsche. It would cost her everything she thought mattered, just to discover what really does. This is the story of how a loss on the green felt became the greatest win of her life. A story of love, sacrifice, and redemption that might just make you rethink what success actually means. If you're someone who believes in stories that hit you right in the heart, you're in the right place. Let's begin. The boardroom on the 47th floor felt smaller by the second. Madison Sterling scanned the faces around the polished mahogany table, each one confirming what she already knew. She had lost. 5 years of negotiations, millions in legal fees and consulting, gone. The most important acquisition in Sterling Enterprises history had just slipped through her fingers. "We're sorry, Madison," said Harrison Webb, CEO of their rival company, with a smug smile that didn't even try to be polite. "We decided to go with Blackstone's offer. It just felt like a better fit. A better fit. Like this was about chemistry and not cold, hard strategy and numbers." Madison forced a neutral expression as she shook hands and exchanged meaningless pleasantries. But inside, she was on fire. That same fire that had carried her to the top of a man's world, only now it burned without direction. At just 32, she'd turned her father's local construction firm into one of the biggest real estate developers on the West Coast. She was the Sterling. But this loss hit different. It wasn't about money or power. It was about proving she belonged. Proving she wasn't just Daddy's little princess. The whispered judgment she'd heard in more boardrooms than she cared to admit. The elevator ride down was silent, every passing floor a painful descent from the corporate Olympus to the bitter real world of business. Her silver Porsche 911 Turbo S waited like a gleaming reminder of everything she'd achieved, but not even 640 horsepower could outrun the sting of failure. She drove aimlessly through Portland's neon-lit streets, empty promises blurring past her window, until a flickering sign caught her eye. Rack and rails, pool, darts, cold beer. A dive bar in a neighborhood her company would probably tear down in a few years to build condos. Perfect. A place where no one would recognize her. A place to drown her frustration in whiskey, far away from people who measured her worth in balance sheets. Inside, it was exactly what she expected. Dim lights, country music, the sticky scent of spilled beer and chalk dust. A few workers in uniforms, a couple of loud college kids, and in the back, one man hunched over the pool table, playing with an almost poetic focus. Madison ordered a double whiskey and watched him play. Tall, broad shoulders filling out a black t-shirt, tousled dark hair. His hands moved with total control, each shot precise and deliberate. The way he calculated angles moved around the table. It was mesmerizing. He was clearly the best player in the room, and that irritated Madison far more than she wanted to admit. Another arrogant guy who thought he ruled the place. Her earlier rage found a new target. Without even realizing, she stood up and walked toward him. "Nice game," she said, her voice sharp with that corporate edge. He looked up. His eyes were hazel gray and strikingly intelligent. He studied her for a beat, then returned to his stance without a word. That annoyed her even more. "Let me guess. You think you're unbeatable," she said, the whiskey fueling her sarcasm. He paused, looked at her again. This time something in his expression shifted, still calm, but there was a subtle danger in his silence. "I'm decent," he said. "Why? You want to play?" The words hung in the air like a dare. Madison Sterling had already lost once today. She wasn't about to lose again. "Actually," she said, stepping forward, "I want to bet my Porsche outside. Against 6 months of your salary, you can't beat me." The bar went quiet. Even the music seemed to fade. He tilted his head as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You sure about that?" he asked, far too calm for someone who'd just been challenged like that. "Absolutely," Madison replied, reaching out her hand. "I'm Madison Sterling." "And you are?" "Diego Morales," he said, gripping her hand with surprising firmness, just enough to send a jolt through her arm. "And I accept your bet." They prepped for the game in tense silence. Diego racked the balls with the same quiet precision he'd used in every shot before, each sphere finding its place like it belonged there. Madison watched closely, searching for signs of nervousness or hesitation. Nothing. He was unreadable. "Standard 8-ball rules?" Diego asked as he tested the weight of a few cue sticks, finally settling on one that looked older than some of the bar stools, worn down, faded. But he held it like it was part of him. "Of course," Madison replied, grabbing the newest, slickest cue she could find. After all, premium gear had to make a difference, right? She'd played before, in country clubs, on dates, at corporate mixers. She always did well. She was smart, competitive. That had to count for something. Diego broke the rack with a crack that echoed through the bar. The balls scattered across the felt in what looked like chaos to Madison, but she noticed how Diego's eyes tracked each movement, like he was reading a language only he understood. A striped ball dropped clean into the corner pocket, and he circled the table with the fluid motion of someone who owned the space. "Stripes?" he said simply, already lining up the next shot. Madison expected him to smirk, to gloat. He didn't. He just bent over the table again, eyes locked in. His second shot made it painfully clear she had made a huge mistake. He didn't just sink the 9-ball, he calculated the bounce off 2 rails to land the cue ball in perfect position for the next shot. It wasn't luck. It was math, geometry, physics, all dialed into muscle memory. "Interesting," Madison muttered, trying to keep her voice steady while a cold bead of sweat traced down her back. Around the room, she noticed conversations dying down. People were watching now, and from the way the regulars leaned in, it felt like they knew what was about to unfold. Then came the third shot, a 4-rail combination involving 3 other balls. It moved like a chain reaction, dominoes falling in perfect sync. The 11-ball drifted across the table, kissed the side pocket, and disappeared with a quiet click that felt louder than it should have. Madison's stomach dropped. This wasn't just skill, it was mastery. This was someone who didn't just understand the game, he commanded it. Like an artist with a canvas. And this worn-down dive bar. This was his studio. "Your turn," Diego said, stepping back and resting his cue stick like a sword. His face was neutral, maybe polite, but Madison caught a flicker in his eyes. Amusement, or maybe pity. Either way, it stung. She approached the table, summoning every ounce of confidence she had left. Her solids were spread out in decent positions. She picked the 3-ball, an easy shot in the corner pocket. Couldn't miss. She missed. The cue ball bounced too hard. The 3 rattled on the edge of the pocket and spun out. Worse, she left the cue ball in perfect position for Diego's next few shots. She hadn't just missed, she'd gift-wrapped him the win. Diego returned to the table with that same unsettling calm. No rush, no gloating, just one clean shot after another. Like a machine built for one purpose. 8-ball corner pocket, he said, tapping the cue to the final shot. Madison could only watch, stunned, as the black ball slid across the felt, kissed the pocket, and vanished. The silence in the bar was deafening. Diego returned the cue to its holder and turned to her with a look that was oddly kind. "Good game," he said. Madison stared at the empty table, then at Diego, then at the Porsche keys in her hand. The full weight of what had just happened slammed into her like a freight train. She had just lost a $200,000 car to a bartender in a dive bar, and the worst part, it wasn't even close. "Who the hell are you?" she blurted out. Diego smiled for the first time since they met, and it changed his entire face. "Someone who takes bets seriously," he said. The keys? The bartender, a burly guy with sleeves of tattoos, was the first to break the stunned silence that followed Diego's win. "First time seeing the Prince play?" he asked Madison, his voice thick with barely hidden amusement. "Should have Googled him before betting your ride." "The Prince?" Madison echoed, still clutching the Porsche keys like they were a live grenade. That nickname didn't fit the quiet, humble man standing in front of her, now wiping down his cue stick with a frayed cloth. "Diego El Príncipe Morales," said an older woman at the bar, her voice full of local pride. "You just got beat by the best pool player this town's ever seen, maybe the best on the whole West Coast back in his prime." Madison turned to Diego, searching for a reaction, but he just kept cleaning his cue, calm and methodical. "That was a long time ago, Señora Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a quiet sadness Madison couldn't quite place. "Long time, my ass," the bartender snapped, pouring Diego a beer without even asking. 2019 wasn't that long ago. I watched you on ESPN, kid. National championship. You were 24, wiping the floor with pros twice your age. Each word hit Madison like a punch. ESPN, national tournament? She'd just wagered her car against a literal pool champion and had no idea. You're a professional player? She asked, her voice teetering between disbelief and rising embarrassment. Was, Diego said softly, finally meeting her eyes. There was something behind them now, something raw. That part of my life ended a while ago. Bullshit, the bartender said, shaking his head. You were the future of the sport. Analysts said you could beat Strickland and Van Boning in a couple years. Sponsors were throwing contracts at you. Madison sank into a bar stool, the weight of everything finally catching up to her. Then why are you here, she asked. Why are you bartending instead of playing pro tournaments? The question lingered in the air, heavy like cigarette smoke. Diego took a slow sip of beer before answering, and when he did, his voice was so low Madison had to lean in to hear. Because some things matter more than fame, he said simply. My parents died in a car crash in January 2020. I'd just qualified for the US Open when I got the call. Mateo was 7. Mateo? Madison asked, but part of her already knew. My little brother. He's autistic, needs consistency, stability. I couldn't just leave him with strangers or toss him into the system. So, he shrugged like walking away from a $1 million career was just obvious. You gave it all up, Madison said, barely above a whisper. I gave up the pro circuit, Diego corrected. I never gave up Mateo. He needed a steady home, special school, therapy. Prize money comes and goes. Tournaments mean travel, chaos. I found this job. It lets me be home every night, flexible for his appointments, and still pay the bills. What a sacrifice, right? Would you have done the same for family? Tell me in the comments. Senora Martinez dabbed her eyes with a napkin. That boy practically raised Mateo on his own, she whispered. Works 3 jobs, bartends here at night, takes construction gigs during the day when money's tight, and still finds time to teach pool to the neighborhood kids every weekend. Madison felt something strange tightening in her chest, an ache she couldn't quite place. Her whole life, she'd been surrounded by men who talked about sacrifice, always someone else's. Here was a man who had lived it, and acted like it was just the natural thing to do. Don't you miss it? She asked, surprising even herself. The tournaments, the recognition, the money. Diego spun the beer glass slowly between his palms, thinking, of course I do. It was my life, my identity. But he looked up, and Madison saw the toll. Years of hard choices and sleepless nights written in the fine lines around his eyes. Mateo gives me something pool never could, real purpose. When he smiles after solving a new math problem, or makes a friend at school despite all the challenges, that's worth more than any trophy. He's a genius with numbers, the bartender chimed in proudly. Stanford's already watching him. Kid's only 12. Diego may have left the pro circuit, but he's raising the next Einstein. Madison looked at Diego differently now. This wasn't just some bartender who got lucky at a pool table. This was a man who had everything: talent, fame, a bright future, and consciously chose a life of hard work and unseen sacrifice. Not for ego, not out of obligation, but because of love. Diego held out his hand gently. The keys. Madison stared down at the Porsche keys, then back up at him. Her whole life had been measured in acquisitions. Companies bought, deals closed, assets accumulated. But looking into Diego's eyes, she wondered if she'd been measuring the wrong things all along. Reluctantly, she placed the keys in his hand. Just tell me one thing, she said. Were you holding back? Could you have won faster? Diego smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I thought about giving you a fighting chance, he admitted. But you looked like someone who needed to learn something that night. Who was I to get in the way of a good lesson? 3 days. That's how long Madison couldn't get Diego Morales out of her head. She tried to drown herself in meetings, multi-million-dollar strategies, expansion pitches. But her mind kept drifting back to a dive bar, to a man who beat her not just at pool, but at everything she thought she understood about life. By Wednesday night, she caved. She drove back to Rack and Rails, telling herself it was just to pick up the Porsche. Nothing more. The car was exactly where she left it. Not a scratch. The keys were hanging from the rearview mirror with a note. Thanks for the game, my D. Of course he didn't take it. Of course, relief hit her first. Then, something else. Something deeper. Respect, admiration, maybe even guilt for judging him the moment she saw him behind that bar. She pushed open the door. Inside, Diego was wiping down tables with that same quiet efficiency. He paused when he saw her. No smile, no anger, just unreadable. "I figured you'd sell the car," Madison said, walking up with a confidence she didn't feel. "It wasn't mine to sell," Diego replied, wringing out the cloth. "You made a dumb bet in a moment of pride. Doesn't mean I should take advantage of it." "A bet's a bet," she insisted, though a part of her was undeniably relieved. "You won, fair and square." Diego stopped, looked right at her. His voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. "You know the difference between you and me? You can afford to lose a $200,000 car and walk away fine. For me, taking that car would have been stealing. I have principles, even if you think mopping floors means I don't." The words stung. Madison flinched. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," Diego said, going back to work. "It was in the way you looked at me, the way you talked. You saw me with a rag in my hand and figured you were better. That bet, that was just your way of proving it." She stood there stunned, because he was right. And they both knew it. "You're right," she said softly. "I acted like an arrogant, entitled jerk. I lost a deal earlier that day and took it out on you. It was ugly. I'm sorry." Diego paused, clearly not expecting that. "I appreciate the honesty," he said after a moment. "I want to meet him," Madison blurted out. "Mateo, your brother." Diego's eyes narrowed instantly. "Why?" Madison hesitated. I don't fully know. I think I just need to understand how someone walks away from everything for someone else." "You don't walk away," Diego said, his voice growing firmer. "You choose what matters. Mateo isn't a burden. He's not a sacrifice. He's my family. He's the reason I get up every morning with purpose." "But your career—" "It was just a career," Diego interrupted. "Mateo is life. He's future. He's unconditional love in a way no trophy ever gave me. When you finally understand the difference between achievement and fulfillment, the choice gets easy." Madison fell silent, letting that hit her. She'd spent her whole life chasing accomplishments. To her, success was fulfillment. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. Saturday came with a kind of anxiety Madison hadn't felt in years, not since her first boardroom pitch. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual her wardrobe allowed. Still, when she looked in the mirror, she felt like someone playing dress-up as a normal person. Diego's apartment complex was a world away from hers. Weathered red bricks, 2-story buildings, kids playing with sidewalk chalk, parents in lawn chairs. It was clean, alive and real, not shiny, not curated, just honest. Apartment 2B was up a narrow set of metal stairs. Before she could even knock, a small voice came from inside. "You're exactly on time. You must be Madison Sterling." The door opened. A thin boy with Diego's dark hair and completely different eyes, deep, analytical, and oddly adult, stood in front of her. Mateo Morales didn't just look at her. He scanned her, like a walking algorithm analyzing every data point. "You're taller than Diego said," he noted, "but your skeletal proportions are consistent with age-standard female measurements. Come in, please. Diego's finishing lunch dishes." Madison followed him into a small, spotless apartment where everything had its place. Math books stacked neatly, puzzle sets sorted by complexity. A chessboard sat in the center of the room like it had its own reserved space. "This is our structure zone," Mateo explained, waving toward the living area. "Diego maintains order because chaos disrupts my cognitive rhythm. Are you familiar with autism spectrum behaviors, or shall I provide a brief overview?" The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, it stunned her. "I know the basics," Madison said carefully. "Good. Saves time and spares us an awkward educational segment," Mateo replied, then sat cross-legged in front of a half-solved Rubik's Cube array. "Diego mentioned you play pool poorly, but learn fast," he added. "That suggests intelligence offset by lack of experience, rather than a spatial processing deficiency. Was that an insult or a compliment?" "I suppose that's accurate," she managed. "It is," Mateo confirmed. "I watched the video of your game." "You saw the video?" "It went viral locally before Diego could report it," Mateo said. "A classmate showed it to me." Madison's stomach dropped. "Wait. It's online?" Diego walked out of the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. His expression was unreadable, but not welcoming. "It got posted Thursday night," he said flatly. "Rich woman loses Porsche to bartender in pool game." Tagged with local businesses. Plenty of comments about class war, rich versus working class. 37,000 views as of this morning, Mateo added helpfully. Comment section heavily favors Diego. Audience sentiment aligns with underdog bias. Negative opinions primarily directed at displays of conspicuous wealth. Though a few accuse Diego of tricking you, which is mathematically inaccurate given documented skill levels. Madison sat down hard on the edge of the couch, her heart pounding. It was bad enough that she'd lost so embarrassingly, but now it was public entertainment. "My company," she muttered. "If this reaches the board—" "It will," Diego said calmly. "It's already been picked up by 2 local blogs and a sports betting site. By Monday, it'll be corporate gossip." In the weeks that followed, Madison kept coming back to Diego's apartment. Officially, she told herself it was researching community investment opportunities, but none of them were buying that, not even her. She was there to see them. Mateo, whose mind worked on levels she barely understood, was solving college-level calculus problems for fun. But more than that, she was struck by the world Diego had created for him. A home where being different wasn't just accepted, it was respected. One afternoon, as Mateo helped a neighborhood teen with geometry homework, Madison turned to Diego. "You ever think about expanding?" Diego looked up from organizing Mateo's books. "Expand how?" "I mean a real community center, after-school programs, pool training, math tutoring. This neighborhood needs investment, and you've already built something people trust." Diego gave her a skeptical look. "And where would I find money for that?" She hesitated, because what she was about to say could change everything. "There's something I need to tell you about my company." But before she could continue, the apartment door flew open. Jennifer, her assistant, burst in, breathless. "Madison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've got a crisis. The Riverside project just got leaked to the press. The board wants you back now." Madison's blood ran cold. Riverside, the secret redevelopment that had been in the works for months. The one set to transform this exact block into luxury condos. "What Riverside project?" Diego asked, his voice slow and dangerously calm. Madison looked between Jennifer and Diego and realized in an instant that her carefully split worlds were about to violently collide. "I can explain," she started. "It's this neighborhood, isn't it?" Diego said, his voice rising. "You're planning to buy this place out, the bar, these apartments, everything." "Diego, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" He stood towering now. "That you came here for weeks, earned our trust, met my brother, and all along you were plotting to evict us." "No, the plans were approved long before I ever met you. I didn't even know—" "Didn't know what?" he snapped. "That you could study our vulnerabilities, figure out how to break the news gently, so we'd thank you while you bulldozed our homes." Mateo flinched at the rising voices, hands beginning to tremble, his telltale sign of rising stress. "Loud volume spike," he said quickly. "Conflict unsettles me. Routine is safety. I need stability." "See what you've done?" Diego said, kneeling next to his brother. "Mateo needs this home, this life. He can't take upheaval." "I didn't want this," Madison said weakly. "Not like this. But this is what happened," Diego said, his voice low and steady now. "You're exactly who I thought you were that first night, someone who sees people as obstacles." Madison's eyes burned. "Diego, please." "Get out," he said softly, "and take your Riverside project with you. What a brutal betrayal. Have you ever trusted someone only to feel completely betrayed? Share your story in the comments below." The following week was pure chaos. The video of the bet had broken into national media. Headlines like "CEO outplayed by bartender in 200K bet" were everywhere, from TikTok to Bloomberg. The public loved it. Corporate America didn't. "Madison," her uncle and board chairman Richard Hawthorne said in a closed-door meeting, "we need to talk about your recent impulsiveness." The boardroom felt colder than ever. 12 eyes watched her like predators sizing up a wounded animal. That video, the bet, your involvement with the neighborhood, this isn't just bad optics. It's a direct threat to investor confidence, said Margaret Chen, the CFO. And the Riverside angle, added another. You've now become the face of unethical gentrification. Madison stayed silent until she felt something shift inside her. Not the usual defense, not pride, conviction. Maybe they're right, she said. A beat of silence. What do you mean? Her uncle asked. Maybe Riverside is unethical. Maybe we are destroying lives for a short-term profit. I didn't see it before, but I do now. You're suggesting, Margaret said, stunned, that we cancel a $500 million development because you developed feelings for a bartender. I'm suggesting we rethink what kind of legacy we're building, Madison said, her voice steady. Her final proposal included everything she'd built over the past 48 hours. Aerial maps with overlays of community-friendly alternatives, case studies on sustainable urban development, and projections showing long-term social ROI. And at the heart of it, she said, a youth center run by Diego Morales, a man who gave up everything to raise his autistic brother and somehow still found time to teach the neighborhood kids math and pool. A bartender? Someone scoffed. No, she said, a leader, and the kind of person our brand desperately needs. The vote was close, 7-5. Rejected. I'm sorry, Madison, her uncle said almost gently. This company can't take that kind of risk. Madison stood, took a breath, and smiled. I understand. In that case, I resign. Silence. You what? Margaret blinked. I resign as CEO of Sterling Enterprises, Madison said, pulling a sealed envelope from her folder. Effective, immediately. I'll also be executing my right to sell my shares at current market value. This is career suicide, Richard whispered. No, she said, walking out of the room. This is freedom. She found them at the playground on a quiet, rainy Sunday. Mateo sat alone on a bench, scribbling equations into a soaked notebook with the same calm precision he always had, as if rain and chaos meant nothing to his focus. Diego was nearby, pushing an empty swing, not for fun, but the kind of pushing you do when your body needs to move just to process pain. Diego, she said softly, walking toward him. He stopped, letting the swing slow down, but didn't turn around. Here to say goodbye? He asked, his voice dull, distant. No, Madison said. I came to say I'm sorry, and to try to explain. Explain how you lied to us for weeks, he said, finally turning. How you smiled at my brother while your company planned to evict us both. I didn't plan any of this, she said, feeling her throat tighten. The Riverside project started 2 years ago. I had no idea you lived here. I didn't even know this neighborhood existed. Until it became your personal charity case, he snapped. Some place to ease your guilt? Mateo looked up, calmly closing his notebook. Diego's cortisol levels have increased by 23% since Madison arrived. His emotional regulation is clearly compromised. She's right, you're angry, Madison said, and you have every right to be, but please, let me explain before you shut me out completely. Diego folded his arms. You've got 5 minutes. Madison nodded. The Riverside project was supposed to be our biggest development. Luxury apartments, upscale retail, a modern vision of this city, she began. It was all spreadsheets and zoning laws, until I met you, until I met Mateo. And now, Diego asked, his voice still cold. Now I know this place isn't underdeveloped, it's alive, it has roots, people, history. Senora Martinez raised 3 kids right there in that corner unit. You teach half the neighborhood math and pool. And Mateo, then cancel the project, Diego said, simple as that. I can't just cancel it, she said. If I walk away without a replacement plan, I lose the company. The board will keep it going without me. And this place, it'll still be gone. Mateo snapped his notebook shut. That's a textbook zero-sum game, he said. Every possible outcome results in significant loss. The only question is, which loss causes the least harm? Madison blinked. He'd just summarized exactly what she was facing. Right, she said. I'm trying to find a solution that saves this neighborhood and keeps the company from turning it into a soulless strip of concrete. And if you can't? Diego asked. Madison drew a breath. Then I choose the community. Diego studied her silently. Rain fell harder. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. You'd give up everything? He finally asked. Everything you've built? Some things are worth more than buildings, she said. Diego finally, let a small smile break through. Now you sound like someone who actually learned something. 2 days later, Madison walked into the boardroom one last time. This wasn't just another presentation. It was a revolution. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, meeting each set of eyes directly, "I'm here to propose a new direction for Sterling Enterprises." Richard let out a long sigh. "Madison, if this is about Riverside—" "It is," she said, cutting in. "But not how you think." She turned on the projector. Slide 1. A high-resolution aerial of the neighborhood, not marked for demolition, but layered with ideas for preservation, revitalization, and empowerment. "I'm not asking you to scrap the project. I'm asking you to reimagine it." Her voice grew stronger. "Instead of destroying a living, breathing community, we enhance it. Renovate aging buildings, create affordable housing, support local businesses, build public spaces, and listen to what the people here actually need." "And the profit margin?" Margaret asked sharply. "Lower up front, but sustainable long-term. And the press? They'll call us pioneers instead of villains." She advanced to the next slide, a mock-up of a brand-new youth center named the Prince Center after Diego's nickname. Billiards tables, classrooms, a mentorship hub for underprivileged kids. "And this will be run by who exactly?" another board member asked. "A man named Diego Morales," Madison answered confidently. "Former national pool champion, community mentor, caregiver, leader." "The bartender?" someone scoffed. "No," she said. "A hero. The kind of person this company desperately needs on its side." What followed was a battle. Passion versus profit. Vision versus tradition. She answered every objection with data, case studies, logic, and heart. But when the votes were counted, 7 against, 5 in favor. "We're sorry," Richard said quietly. "It's an admirable idea, but we just can't afford to take that risk." Madison nodded. "I understand." And then she dropped the real bomb. "In that case," she said calmly, "I'm stepping down." Gasps echoed around the table. "You're what?" Margaret said. "I'm resigning as CEO of Sterling Enterprises," she said, handing over a sealed envelope. "Effective immediately. You're throwing away your future over this." "No," Madison said, turning toward the door. "I'm choosing a better one." The bar was open again, but quieter than usual. The buzz was gone. The weight of everything that had happened still hung in the air like a fog. Madison walked in, spotted Diego alone at the pool table, practicing shots like it was the only thing holding him together. "I heard you did something unbelievably stupid," he said, without looking up. "Or incredibly smart," Madison replied, still deciding. "Giving up an empire to save a single city block," he muttered, lining up his next shot. "That's definitely stupid." "But I didn't step down to save a city block," she said, walking closer. "I did it to save my soul." That made him pause. Cue stick still in hand, Diego turned to look at her. Really look at her, with those calm, stormy eyes that had once called her out without saying a word. "And now?" he asked. "Now I have a business proposal," she said, pulling a folder from her bag. "A real one. No guilt, no charity, no hidden motives." Diego set down his stick and crossed his arms. "I'm listening. I want to personally invest in building the center we talked about. Billiards, tutoring, mentorship programs. You as co-owner and director. I'll provide the capital. You run it 50-50. "Why would you do that?" he asked, cautious. "Because I believe in what you're building. Because I've seen what you're doing for Mateo and for the kids around here. And because Mateo needs to grow up believing his dreams don't require someone else to give theirs up." Diego flipped through the proposal. It was real, detailed, legal, viable. "This is a lot of money," he said. "It's called smart investing," she smiled. "You have the heart, the trust, the vision. I have resources and a business brain. Together, we make something no one else could. And if we fail, then at least we tried to build something that matters." Diego studied her for a long moment, like he was measuring more than numbers. Finally, he reached out his hand. "Mateo's going to want to see the financials before I sign anything." "Of course," Madison laughed. "He's the smartest one between us." "Probably," Diego agreed. "Partners?" She shook his hand, firm and sure. "Partners." 6 months later, the Prince Center stood where Rack and Rails once did, reborn. Gone were the dusty tables and dim lights. In their place, 3 tournament-level pool tables, a tutoring lounge with laptops and textbooks, a small basketball court, and a wall lined with community trophies. "Miss Madison," a voice shouted. It was Emma, one of Diego's first students, holding up a certificate. "I won the regional youth tournament. Diego says it's 'cause of the geometry you taught me." Madison knelt and smiled. "You won because you practiced and never gave up. I just helped with the angles." "Geometry is the backbone of billiards," came a voice from across the room. Mateo, now 13, was helping a high schooler with trigonometry. He'd unofficially become the center's assistant tutor, his calm way of breaking down complicated problems making him a favorite. Diego walked out of the office with a stack of papers. "We've got a wait list for summer classes," he announced, and Stanford confirmed. "They're sending a scout for Mateo this fall." "At 13?" Madison asked, impressed but not surprised. "Special program for gifted youth," Diego said, pride in every word. "He can start college-level courses next year." Madison watched as Mateo explained an equation to a struggling teen. The center was thriving, serving over 100 kids regularly, and already they were talking about expansion. "Time for our Sunday game?" Diego asked, checking the clock. It had become their weekly tradition, just the three of them. No pressure, no stakes, just fun, connection, and a little trash talk. "Today's the day I finally beat you," Madison said, chalking her cue dramatically. "Statistically unlikely," Mateo said cheerfully. "At current improvement rate, you'll need approximately 18 more months of training." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," she laughed. As they played, Madison took it all in. The joy, the lightness, the life in that space. She'd given up an empire, but gained a family. Diego leaned in for his shot, but before he played, he turned and pulled out a small box from his pocket. "Actually," he said, "I think it's my move." Madison froze. "Madison Sterling," he said, dropping to one knee beside the pool table, as Mateo looked on with a mix of curiosity and scientific observation. "You changed my life, you made us whole, and you showed me that some games aren't about winning, they're about who you're playing for. Will you marry me?" Madison couldn't speak. The man who had taught her that true success wasn't in what you win, but in who you love, was now asking to spend his life with her. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, of course." Mateo tilted his head. Statistically speaking, this outcome was significantly more likely than Madison winning today's match. They all laughed, and Madison realized she had finally learned how to play the only game that really matters, the game of a life lived with purpose and love. And just like that, Madison learned the most important lesson of her life, that real success isn't measured by what we achieve, but by the lives we touch, by the people we stand up for, by the love we choose, even when it costs us everything. What started as a reckless bet in a rundown bar turned into a journey of rediscovery, redemption, and something even richer than wealth: purpose. Madison realized that true richness doesn't live in bank accounts or portfolios. It lives in human connection, in love that shows up when no one's watching, in sacrifices that never make headlines, in communities that hold each other up instead of pushing each other out. Diego reminded us that real love sometimes requires giving up everything you thought mattered. And Mateo, well, he showed us that our greatest differences can become our greatest strengths, if we're brave enough to let them shine. So now I ask you, what would you do in Madison's place? Would you walk away from power, for love, for people, for purpose? If this story touched your heart, do something small that makes a big difference. Hit the like button. It helps this story reach more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next powerful journey. Comment below. What part of this story moved you the most? Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of what truly matters. Your engagement fuels this channel and keeps these stories alive. And next week, I'll bring you the story of a doctor who broke every rule to save a life and forced the world to question what really makes a hero. Until next time, remember, sometimes life's greatest victories come from the losses that hurt the most. Take care, and I'll see you in the next chapter.